Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon. Hello guys, how's your day? I hope it's fine. I am Ashikin from Group 7. Before we start our discussion, I will share this video first. So let's watch it.
Natural disasters are part of the way the planet works. In the ideal world, we would all live in places that aren't affected by natural hazards. We wouldn't live near coastlines. We wouldn't live along the San Andreas Fault in California. We wouldn't live underneath the volcanoes in the Pacific Northwest. But we live where our homes are. I mean, those are the places that are important to us. And then there are many people that don't have choices. The museum is presenting this exhibit to describe these events to people so they have a better understanding of earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, and tornadoes. But more than that, to begin thinking about the risks associated with them. As climate warms, we expect there to be more severe storms, more severe droughts, more wildfires, and to some extent, over the last decade, we've seen just that. There's no way we're going to avoid the natural hazards on a dynamic Earth, but there are certainly ways that we can learn to live with them to mitigate the risks to society.
So how's the video guys? It's crazy when you think about how a flood can run a country in just a blink of an eye. Can you imagine that? So that will answer what is our discussion topic for today, which is natural disaster in today's world. Do you know the true meaning of natural disaster? Do you know what is natural disaster? So let me tell you what is natural disaster. Natural disaster is an extreme sudden event caused by environmental factor that injure people and damage property and occur without warning. There are many types of natural disaster that happen in our world today. The most common one is earthquake. Earthquake happen when the earth releases pent-up energy and cause the ground to shake. 80% of them occur along the rim of the Pacific Ocean, which what we call ring of fire. The daily occurrence is transit earthquake that rocked China and killed 830,000 people with magnitude of 7.9. Next is tsunami. Tsunami is a consists of huge waves caused by underwater earthquake and volcanic eruption and can get as high as 100 feet. And the deadly occurrence is Indian Ocean tsunami that killed nearly 300,000 people in 2004. The third one is hurricane, typhoon, and cyclone that refer to the same weather phenomena, which is a large storm swirling in circle and reach wind speed of over 300 km per hour and can cause over 900 liters of rainfall per day. The Ebola cyclone in 1970 that struck Ganges Delta in Bangladesh and killed 300,000 people is the daily occurrence of hurricane. That is wildfire, which is uncontrolled fire that happen in forests that occur from human factor, lightning and spontaneous combustion in very hot and dry climate. The daily occurrence that happened in US that called the Great Pacific Fire and killed nearly 2,400 people and also destroyed $1 million worth of property. The other type of natural disaster is flood, avalanche, mudslide or what we call landslide, and volcanic eruption, and the last one is drought. Next, I will show you data on global reported natural disaster by type. But the key issue here is the inconsistency of data reported in the past. But as you can see, flood hold the greatest number natural disaster reported, while volcanic eruption hold the least number natural disaster reported.
What are the impact of natural disaster to the economy? In terms of economic growth, we can understand this by examining the short run, which is a period of several months after disaster, while middle run is the reconstruction phase that can last up for 3 years, and long run is when the reconstruction process has ended and people have adopted the new circumstances. The impact can also be viewed through growth model. The difference between traditional neoclassical growth model and neoclassical growth model are that the former does not agree that the deconstruction of capital stocks will affect the technological process, unlike neoclassical. Neoclassical also believe that the shocks will act as a catalyst for reinvestment and improve productivity of capital stocks. During short run, the prices of goods, especially basic necessities, will rise. This is because demand exceeds supply. Next is capital labor ratio, which is capital stock per worker ratio. It is also related to the steady state of a country. Steady state is a condition where output per worker, capital per worker, and consumption per worker are constant. During the reconstruction phase, the locals at the affected area might decide to immigrate to another region. This may be because of an increase in unemployment as a result of the natural disaster. Next is indifferent decisions among locals. During the phase, people are faced with different kinds of investment decisions. As the impact of unemployment is felt upon them, they might decide differently in regards to education, thus affecting the capital stocks in terms of human capital and labor. Other than that, the region in which tourism plays an important source of income may experience economic downturn as tourists might find it not worthwhile to visit until the reconstruction phase are done. Lastly, the negative shocks in FDI. The damages from natural disaster might be an obstacle to the normal operation of their business. Thus, investors might consider the investment in disaster-stricken country to be more risky and opt to invest somewhere else. The impact of introducing new technology during the reconstruction phase can be observed in the long run. The incorporation of these new technologies may allow increased production with the same amount of inputs, therefore conducing to a greater future growth. Studies have shown that natural disasters update capital stock and encourage the adoption of new technologies, which lead to improved total factor productivity and the growth of gross domestic product. Another study also have shown that the quality of reconstruction is what determines whether the disaster have a positive or negative long-run effect. For example, if a construction project after an earthquake pays more attention to anti-seismic standard, the vulnerability of future earthquake will decrease. Less developed countries are more vulnerable to climate natural disaster in comparison to industrialized countries, which are more vulnerable to geographical natural disaster. A more appropriate metric to compare economic costs over time is to look at them in relation to GDP. In the chart shown here, we see global direct disaster losses given as a share of GDP. The data shows that the direct economic losses from the disasters have declined, which is good news. The disaster losses are declining as a proportion of GDP. It indicates that disaster losses are less significant in the context of global economic activity. This is surely a positive sign.
Next, natural disasters also affect to the factors of production. As we know, the factors of production typically include land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. But let's focus on land first. Land is a natural resource and income earned from land is called rent. The land destroyed from natural disaster can cause the destruction of building, destroy home, loss of habitat for flora and fauna, and also can cause the pollution. There are many types of natural disasters such as bushfire, flood, drought, typhoon, and earthquake. This natural disaster can give a huge number of deaths and economic loss. Then, the guidelines provide a holistic approach to addressing land issues from the immediate aftermath by using these methods such as leveling, position determination, angle measurement, and others. It is also known as the recovery and reconstruction phase. Next, we are moving on to the labor. Labor is a human input into production that in need of education, skill, and motivation. The reward or income for labor given by the employer is called wages. Natural disaster can give the direct impact to the human capital, such as loss of human life and increase the unemployment. It is because the employer cannot provide a suitable and safe workplace, and they are also unable to run the business and therefore unable to pay their employees. However, there are many ways to ensure the human capital welfare, such as offering the choice of taking accrued paid leave, considering voluntary work sharing arrangement, considering flexible arrangement, or maybe work from home.
Okay, let's continue for my part. When we mention the world population, the current US census in 2090 shows that the current global population is about 7.5 billion. And China is the first line with the most populous country in the world, and India is the second most populous country. And those two countries are only country have more than 1 billion population, and India is expected to become the most populous country in the world at least in 2050. But what happened if the natural disaster continues to strike our world? Let's talk about the decrease of the population. Okay, according to the statistic, the natural disaster kill on average 30,000 people per year. And now we talk about the annual deaths from the natural disaster. From the table, we can see that in early 20th century, the annual deaths of the total disaster was really high, which is often reaching over 1 billion per year. But in recent decades, we have seen a decline in deaths in most years fewer than 20,000 a day. Why? Because of the early prediction, more resilient infrastructures, emergency preparedness and response system. And next we discuss number of deaths by type of natural disaster. From the graph we can see that historical quick flows and droughts result in a large number of deaths, and over the last few decades, the earthquake result in high deaths. And from the table, next, let's look at some example. First, in Japan, because earthquakes are very often occurred here with magnitude 7.0 or above. The 2011 earthquake of the Pacific coast was a powerful earthquake that struck which magnitude reached 9.0 and caused 11,200 people dead and 30,300 people missing. Next, Indonesia, which suffered the worst rainfall in more than a decade, and the floods has killing more than 30 persons from more than 74 districts affected. Finally, we conclude that improves the living standard, infrastructure, and response system is affected to region to be a key or prevent deaths from natural disaster in the coming decade.
Okay, let's start our topic. What is poverty? Poverty is lacking enough resources to provide the necessities of life. But in today's world, necessity also include health, car, education, and transportation. As of 2015, the three countries with the greatest number of people living extreme poverty are India, followed by Nigeria. Millions of people around the world live extreme poverty, which nearly 10% of world population. Here is almost 1 billion. The World Bank poverty line of 1.9 per day, and last the extremely poorly without supposed, where they are shaped by the world's economic and live abundant in signature. When nature strikes, the world's poor suffers the most because extreme food and extreme poverty by about 3.7%, capacity is powered by 3%, and CC poverty by 1.5%. Natural disaster had more advertising impact on the poor than widely believed, which forcing some 26 million people into poverty each year. Poverty cases disaster, and disaster case poverty. Disaster strike poor people often lose their assets on which their survival depends, and the same goes with middle class. Destruction of assets can include household towers, chronic poverty, whereby the lack of income to relevant to previous situation and putting them into a poverty trap. And for the example, Haramis, which destroyed over a quarter of the household. However, because the poorest households had so little to start with, their impact was more survives. Finally, strategy to recover poverty have 4 points. First one, expanding and increase the coverage of state night program. The second one is scaling up health, diagnostic, and cavities in understored area. And for the The third one is ensure poor people agency shock that can push them deeper into poverty, such as pandemics and economics growth. And for the last one is growth in global
Financial crisis. What is financial crisis? Financial crisis is a situation where value of assets drop rapidly. Investors often panic during financial crisis. They sell off securities or withdraw money from bank account because they fear that the value will drop if they remain in a financial institution. In this case, natural disaster result in inflation because increasing debt burden for the recovery. The recovery after natural disaster is a costing society and government paying most of the bill resulting to extra debt. Then, officials might forcing central banks to print more money to help end a financial crisis resulting to the inflation. As example, in Turkey, following a series of earthquakes in 1999, the amount of taxes collected fell substantially result from economic slowdown. The loss in revenue resulting in government taking loans from abroad which total up to $2 billion. This debt will later cause hardship to Turkey's government because it will cause inflationary pressure to government. Other than that, market forces in area affected also will result in inflation. Prices of goods will skyrocket following disaster as it interrupts product supplies such as food, housing, and electricity. Commodity demand is also rising as disasters are destroying their personal possessions and housing. Controlling commodity prices will also result to creation of black market, especially in large regions and rural areas. Thus, restoring infrastructure as soon as after a disaster is the best way to contain inflation. In example, if wages do not keep up with the inflation, the real household income of a family will fall during the period. Next, it will affect the household's daily life as parents will have an incentive to take children out of school and bring impact to a greater effect to human capital accumulation. The children's health also will deteriorate because parents may not have money to provide proper nutrition and cause malnutrition that affects a sizable number of children, then possible human capital accumulation for those children will fall. Thus, financial crises that cause inflation could hurt long-run growth directly or through human capital accumulation.
Hi everyone, we're going to talk about ways of a country can prepare to respond to natural disasters. As we all know, natural disasters occur worldwide and are part of everyone's life. The first point is local communities' involvement. According to research, a community that is struck by disaster recovers faster if locals are involved in the restoration process. Nobody knows communities better than their residents, and it's necessary to involve them at every step of planning and rebuilding process. The second point is every country should have early warning system. As an example, earthquake early warning system has been deployed in only a handful of the world's seismic hot zones. This system can warn people minutes before an earthquake strikes. The third point is increased coordination. The lack of coordination between the government and local authority coupled with corruption and fearism lead to the uneven delivery of aid across the country. And in Japan, earthquake happens very often. The local governments and large-scale facilities prepare instruction manual in case of an emergency and regularly practice safety rules as part of their preparing for dangerous situation. Last but not least is a long-term relief. Recovery of the local economy and livelihoods is the key to long-term relief. People can be more prepared for upcoming natural disasters. In conclusion, natural disasters lead us to many effects that can endanger the world physically and mentally. However, we can prevent them by implementing many kind of approaches. Therefore, natural disasters may bring bad impacts in short term, but it will help our world be improved and be more strong in the future. And that will be our last learning for today. Hopefully, everyone will take a lesson from this and make our life more better. Thank you. And thank you for all my group mates. Thank you for the cooperation. Thank you for the hard work. Bye bye.